The pen is mightier than the sword, but the auto pen is not. President Trump declaring that the pardons issued by former President Biden, including those for the January the 6th committee, are void.
The president posting on Truth Social, quote, the pardons, and that's in quotations, that Sleepy Joe Biden gave to the unselect committee of political thugs and many others are hereby declared void, vacant, and of no further force or effect because of the fact that they were done by autopen. In other words, Joe Biden did not sign them, but more importantly, he did not know anything about them, exclamation point.
And White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt echoed the president's sentiments.
The president was raising the point that did the president even know about these pardons? Was his legal signature used without his consent or knowledge? And that's not just the president or me raising those questions. According to the New York Post, there are Biden officials from the previous White House who raised those questions and wondered if the president was even consulted about his legally binding signature being signed onto documents.
Dagan, I watched that briefing. My favourite part was when Caitlin Collins from CNN says, well, have you got any evidence for this? And Caroline Leavitt says, well, you're a reporter, you find out. Exactly. Anyway, for more, let's bring in Article 3 Project founder and president Mike Davis. Mike, what do you make of this? Should these pardons be voided?
Well, I would say this. America learns you probably shouldn't elect a demented president, so we shouldn't have to have this discussion. But the reason we're having this discussion is we had demented Joe Biden. So, look, politicians use auto pens all the time. House members, Senate members, presidents. The issue here is not the use of the auto pen. It's whether the auto pen was carrying out what the president wanted signed, if it was carrying out the president's will. If you're carrying out the president's will, these pardons are valid. If you're doing this without the president's knowledge or worse, against the president's will, these pardons are not valid. And how you test this is you would have to bring charges against people who were pardoned. The defendants would raise the pardon in court, and then you would litigate whether the pardon is valid in that court.
Do you think it legitimately goes that way to prove whether Joe Biden was, in essence, either he was cognitively aware of what he was doing or disconnected and thinking about something else like pudding?
Well, you look, after Joe Biden and his administration went after Trump, his top aides, and put him in prison, his supporters on January 6th, that we politically persecuted parents, Christians, let's roll the dice. Let's give it a shot and see if these pardons are valid or not. Maybe we can start with Hunter Biden.
I think there's a broader point here as well, which is just generally what happened during that administration that was not really done, led, initiated by the person that Americans thought they were elected. We see stories coming out now about the fact that he had to have scripts for meetings with his cabinet secretaries. I mean, it's just unbelievable. There should be a broader investigation into all of that. Another aspect of the changes we're seeing right now, President Trump is slamming a judge who ordered the federal government to reinstate thousands of fired workers.
Well, I think it's absent. I have nothing to do with that other than I heard about the decision. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely. It's a judge that's putting himself in the position of the president of the United States, who was elected by close to 80 million votes. And you have that. Having more and more of that's a very dangerous thing for our country. And I would suspect that we're going to have to get a decision from the Supreme Court.
Mike, you're a very serious constitutionalist. What do you make of this argument now, where you have these judges asserting their authority, the executive branch saying, no, sorry, this is our responsibility? Where do you come down on this?
President Trump campaigned on the fact that he's going to hire Elon Musk, he's going to set up Doge, and they're going to go clean out the waste, fraud, and abuse in the executive branch. And President Trump is doing the unthinkable. He's actually doing what he promised voters he would do. He is exercising core Article 2 power, executive power under the Constitution, and these activist judges are sabotaging him. The recourse for fired employees is to go to the Merit System Protection Board. It's not to run to a left-wing radical activist judge and get reinstated against the president's will. This is clearly unconstitutional. It must get fixed fixed on appeal.
And before we go, the judge's ruling related to the removal of gang members, Trinidad Aragua gang members, out of the country. Carrie Urban was talking about this. This is, in essence, an interference by one judge, by the judiciary, in the execution of national security, immigration, and foreign policy by the executive branch. Never granted the power. I mean, that is a very dangerous step. Final word, Mike.
That is why I am calling for the impeachment of D.C. Obama Judge Jeb Boasberg. He is sabotaging the President of the United States. He held a hearing during the middle of a national security operation, putting American lives in danger, along with the lives of our allies. He's demanding sensitive information about the operation that he's not entitled to. The House needs to impeach this judge.
Mike Davis, thank you, sir.
Thank you.